Hello, and welcome to Appleton Engaged. I'm your host, Timber Smith, DEI coordinator for the city of Appleton.
And I'm Andy Anam, the communications manager for the city.
And Appleton Engaged is a podcast that explores the many people, organizations, and resources that make our community a great place to live, work, and play. So whether you're a longtime resident or just getting to know Appleton, join us as we learn more about our community together.
Today we have an incredible guest with us, and the organization she belongs to talks about shaping the future of the Fox cities when it comes to well-being.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. This is going to be a great conversation. I'm actually very, very excited about this conversation. Particularly, I think this organization is had great impact, and I'm thinking more of the community needs to learn more about it. But first, we got to meet the guests. And this week's guest is Beth Flaherty. Beth is the co-chairperson for Imagine Fox Cities and chair of the Community Foundation Board. How are you doing, Beth?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here.
Fantastic. Thank you for making time for us here at Appleton Engaged. Beth, can you please tell us about yourself and your association with Appleton and the surrounding Fox Cities region?
Sure. I grew up in Madison and then went out to California to college and went to law school back in Madison. And then I worked in public interest law in various arenas in Boston and Washington, D.C., and then back in Milwaukee. And my husband and I moved up to the Fox Cities in 1997, and we've raised our 4 children here. And they are now out doing their own lives. And while raising them, I was able to get very involved in the Fox Cities through various mechanisms, boards, and other nonprofit work. So I feel really fortunate to live here and be able to give back to such a great community.
Awesome. Beth, can you please tell us about Imagine Fox Cities?
Yes, Imagine Fox Cities is a very unique and I think exciting initiative. It started back about 2017, 2018, when some folks who were really involved in the community thought, what would be possible if we actually tried to envision the community we want as a community and then work toward that as a vision in every decision we make, policy-wise, financial-wise, and just the decisions we make to try to bring the community forward. But we thought that in order to do that, the very first thing we needed to do was listen to the community. We thought it was time to actually listen to what our community wanted rather than a handful of people deciding what the community should have or do. So we spent a year doing in-person dialogues, 90-plus dialogues with facilitators in all different segments of the community in a variety of languages. We conducted almost 3,000 surveys in different languages in a variety of our communities in the Fox Cities.
3,000?
Yes. Wow. And then we spent an entire summer, this is my favorite part, in the library, the Appleton Library. They designated a room for us where there was a team of 15 people who took every comment made about what future individuals wanted to see for their children and grandchildren and put all of those on sticky notes on the walls and spent a summer digesting those, collating those, and actually discerning a vision out of every single comment made. And it was a really unique process. We heard from national people in public health that nobody really does that. Nobody really listens to the community in that detailed of a way. And so we, through that, came up with a very distinct vision with 4 elements. And we held a summit in October of 2018 with 300 plus people to reveal the vision and then get further input about how we could move as a community toward that vision.
What did we learn? Just, at the highest level.
Highest level, I'll put it in the 4 categories that we ended up slotting all the comments into. And I have to say that it started with multiple pillars, and then we distilled it down to 4. One is that we all feel like this is a place where you can feel you belong. People feel welcome. They feel like it is a friendly place, except not everyone feels that. We see that there's people being left out, people not being included, and very important, I learned, it's not just being included, but feeling like you can contribute. You don't just take people who are new or maybe a little different from you and teach you your ways of living and your customs, but we need to have newcomers or people from different backgrounds feel like they can contribute to the community as well. And I think that's a critical distinction. So that is one thing we learned. We also learned that our community values our spaces, so both cultural and environmental gathering spaces. We think we have some fabulous places to gather and be a community, but everyone wants more. And they want all of those spaces to feel more inclusive. So they might be welcoming to you, but there are groups of people that may not feel welcome in some of our spaces. So we really want to increase those and make sure that they're welcoming and inclusive of all. The third thing is we really feel strongly that our children need to be educated in a way that recognizes their individuality, that education is a key linchpin to why people want to live here, and that education should continue throughout our lifetimes, that people in our older years deserve to be learning and growing as well as younger people. But the crux of it all is that each individual deserves to be met where they are in learning and growing as a person. So that's a huge value. And then the fourth is jobs with not only a livable wage that allows you to find housing and food and other necessities, but it respects you as a person, where you feel like the job is looking after your well-being. So they nurture you as an individual as well as provide for you to have a decent life that protects your well-being. So those are the four core pillars of our vision, and I think they're pretty understandable when you hear them, and they make a lot of sense. And within each of the pillars, there's things like within the livable wage, housing comes under that. If you have a livable wage, you can then find housing. So they each have different aspects that we tuck in each of those pillars. One thing we did also learn that overrides everything that people value is strong mental health. So we feel like that has to be a constant. Somewhat like belonging has to be a constant, but people are seeing that people are struggling with mental health and that we need to always keep that front of mind to support our community in their mental health journey.
This study was completed, I'll call it a study.
Yeah, fine.
Was completed pre-COVID, right?
It was, but we issued another survey in 2020.
Okay.
2021, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Following the pandemic to see what had happened. And I bet we can all guess what happened. Our mental health plummeted, especially amongst groups like LGBTQ and the elderly and minorities. So we did see a decline in well-being since the pandemic. So that was both that coupled with our initial survey were really informative. And we got national attention for that because other communities just weren't doing that. So we have had, in fact, a documentary has recently been made, including us, and what we did with listening to community voice and moving forward with a vision based on community voice. So I'm really proud of that work, listening, especially to our community.
I would agree. I appreciate the fact that the organization took the time to do the research first and didn't just make assumptions.
Well, it's so much easier to make an assumption and move forward to the action as quickly as you can because you might see people suffering and you want to help them. But I do believe now, after all of this work, that starting with the listening is going to get you more toward the goal than just rapidly trying to take action.
First of all, kudos to you for covering such wide array of emotions at different levels. I mean, we humans are so diverse in our own thoughts, and then to do that kind of survey, community-wide is not an easy feat. So congratulations on that. After you gathered this data, what were your next steps into the process? Because that means you have to have a huge conversation with different stakeholders, city, and even communities and individuals. So what were your next step of action in this process?
Just to take one step back, in the process of our deciding to create a vision through the listening in the community, we also looked at what were the actions. If we were going to do this, what were the actions we could take? And we hired some consultants in community work, and we learned that I call these the verbs of the work. There were 5 different ways that we could actually tackle some of these things. And just as examples, one would be convening people around them, Because Imagine Fox Cities is not going to go out and solve the housing problem, solve the healthcare problem, solve the education problems. But to convene people around those issues was a role we could play. Another would be catalyzing work. If we see something through our partners in the community that could really be done to make some change, helping to catalyze that through convening donors or inspiring donors or leveraging some research to get work to actually be done. Communicating the vision to the community and to individuals as well as organizations is another one of the verbs of what we could do. So as you can hear, it's kind of that filling in the gaps in the community around the vision as opposed to actually conducting the work. But the first thing we knew had to happen was that people even knew this vision existed. They had to first know why have a vision, that the vision does exist, and then they needed some inspiration as to what they could do to move the vision forward. And we wanted everything from large corporations down to an individual to see themselves in this vision, because it wasn't for Imagine Fox Cities, again, to do all of the work, but to see that the population in the community is each finding their way. You could have a neighbor bring a cake to someone who just had a baby next door, and that is trying to create belonging. That is trying to achieve the vision. And you could also have a corporation try to make sure that the way they treat their employees brings about their well-being. So there's large and small ways, and everyone can play a role. Unfortunately, COVID happened right when we were starting to organize on how to inform the community about the vision and its value and their role. So in 2022, we decided, once we were kind of coming out of the pandemic, we held an entire week of activities, because instead of one session in conference room, in the afternoon where not everybody can attend, we wanted to meet everyone where they were at. So we had 26 different events across the community for a variety of populations in which we could kind of reintroduce the vision and reintroduce the fact that we are a multifaceted community that needs to support each other. So that was August of 2022, and we held sessions on each pillar as well as celebration sessions around who we are as a community. And so that is really the next step, is making sure that we're out there almost in a grassroots way, making sure people understand this vision, incorporate it into their daily lives, and figure out a way that they can be useful to bring it forward to improve our community for future generations.
So my question was going to be, what is the end game? But that is the end game. To improve the community for future generations.
That is the end game. Right now, we do not foresee in the immediate time period to change that vision, because if you change a vision too frequently, you're never going to get a forward progress. I'm sure you could relate to that. So there is a possibility that into another generation, that target might shift a little bit. When we do other surveys, which we would like to do, you might see a little jog here and there into what the community wants, hopefully not in too dramatic a fashion. But generally, yes, Timber, that is the goal, that we have created this community for future generations that feel as strongly about the Fox Cities as we do now. If we don't do that, there's always a chance that we shift as a community and we lose our mojo, and we aren't the place that we love right now. And if we do this in a great way, some of the people who don't see this place as so great of a place will change how they feel about it in the future due to our hard work and focused direction.
So what are some of the initiatives in that direction? Because I am really loving this conversation. And I will also have a follow-up question, that why you felt like this change is needed.
Well, I'll first give an example of the immediate way I think the vision can help. We have the Appleton Library right now, which is going through a renovation, and we're raising some private dollars in addition to the city dollars to do that beautiful renovation. As we all know, the library is a free place, open to the public for all walks of life, so it provides another space for belonging and connection that our population said in the survey they wanted. So the group of people who are raising the money for the private dollars have put together a document in their work that compares the vision to the vision of the library, and it happens to match up perfectly, so that when this group goes to donors, they can say, this is not just what 12 people think is important. This library actually matches exactly with the vision that the community created through all of that research. So it helps elevate certain projects to say, this is what the community wants. Prior to that, you couldn't confidently say that the community wants something. It might have been 20 people, it might have been 3 people, but this way you can see in any initiative, hey, you know what? What we're doing over here, this is exactly matching with the 4 pillars of the vision. So we are confident that we're doing what the people here want to see. So that, I know it's a little bit clunky, but that is for right now what we think the vision can really do is support and encourage the work that people might already be doing or be thinking of doing because we have the community support behind it.
I think it's fantastic to have an organization that takes on some of the capacity of doing that kind of research and then is able to share it with some of the other community stakeholders who are able to then put it into fruition.
Exactly. And when they're out looking for funding, for example, a mental health organization like Samaritan, they can confidently show their donors or prospects that this is something not just implanted on the community that they think is important, but the community itself has recognized it. So it gives it a little more elevation as far as importance and acknowledging that it's community-wide belief. But I think to your question, Annie, about the second question, I believe, was why did we think we should do this? I've done a lot of community work for the 20-some years that I've lived here. And each time, whether it's the PAC or the symphony or the art museum, we were always speculating, as I kind of referenced before, what we think would benefit the community. And when you do enough of that work, you kind of want to start thinking about the community as a whole and 20 years from now, 50 years from now, how do we make these decisions? So a few of us just sat down and said, we need to think bigger than an individual project that is somebody's pet project. We need to figure out a way to make these choices on a community-wide basis rather than every single time someone has an idea, just launching it. And so that it really came from people who spend a lot of time working on community initiatives, trying to think of a way to be more inclusive of what the community wants rather than just some people who are actively involved, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, this is such a beautiful blossoming idea, approach, and thought because, you will see the impact 20 years down the lane. Maybe we won't be there to see it, but the future generation will experience it.
Can you please share a story with us that helps kind of show some of the impact that Imagine Fox Cities has had?
I have a couple probably, but remember I mentioned one of the pillars is that the spaces we have are wonderful, but they could be more inclusive.
Yes.
The work that we've done through especially the most recent convening, the Strive to Thrive week I mentioned with all of the activities, really elevated some work of a young man who was working on inclusion in the outdoors as an AmeriCorps volunteer. And he was doing research with our outdoor spaces, nature preserves, and other places where we can gather in our nature environment, and working on how our minority populations feel in those spaces, and learned that it was challenging for a number of groups of people. And so we elevated that work into one of the sessions in Strive to Thrive. We tried to allow him to have access to a lot of different people to do more discussions around that issue and really elevate it to the point where he's been working at the Community Foundation recently to try to move forward that issue of inclusion in the outdoors. And so I feel like we gave a platform for some research that he was already doing, but we took that platform and said, this is not only what he was interested in, but the community wants this, so let's listen. So I think that's one good example.
Yes, I got to attend that session,
and
good. It was fascinating.
Yes.
Like, there was a really good panel there, and what I really appreciated about it was honest. It was very honest about how people felt as far as diversity engaging outdoor spaces.
I think we like to talk about the pride we have in our community, and we're afraid to talk about the things that may need improving. But I don't think that's going to open the way to a better community.
Right.
I think we have to be willing to say, where can we improve with the mindset that we believe we can. That's the positive side. We believe we can improve, but we can't do that unless we listen to each other.
I think more importantly, we got to ask.
Yep.
Because if you have a community who typically doesn't get asked, then they don't think they can ever offer.
Yep,
So to be asked is where the magic happens.
exactly.
Is there anything the community can do to be helpful?
Well, I think one of the beauties of this initiative, which I kind of referenced earlier, is that we each have a role to play in achieving each of these pillars. And like I said before, just a neighbor reaching out to another neighbor is an act of improvement. It's actually it's an act of social justice. Because if we all sit inside our homes and don't show care and love and inclusion, we're not going to have belonging. We're not going to have group effort or initiatives toward a better future. So each one of us can look and say, you know what am I presented with today that could improve the belonging in our community? What could I do on that nature trail today that makes someone feel included and safe? So you don't have to be a big corporation to help with this. However, if you are a leader in a big corporate entity, how can your corporation more closely align with your daily activities with these pillars? What might you do within your organization to make sure there's well-being within your organization and that has high priority as well as a livable wage? So I think looking at imaginevoxcities.org and looking at the 4 pillars and maybe putting a poster on your conference room of the pillars and in some of your meetings saying, where are we at with these 4? Let's list what we're doing within each one of those and how can we improve. And if every single person and organization did that, just imagine where we'd be. There's opportunity for everyone. So it's something that I find really exciting. You don't even have to go to a meeting. You can just think, where can I offer? And there's a place for you.
So if there are any volunteering opportunities to join the organization, what are the ways to do that?
Well, I think the most important is what I just said, finding out in your own organizations and your personal life what you can do, and it might spur some new ideas. We are in the process right now of kind of restructuring because we'd like to add a staff person who can help inform and shepherd this vision around the community, which takes a lot of time and a lot of listening. So you can always go to imaginefoxcities.org and give your name. We have an administrator who looks at those and say that you might want to get involved. So let's say we hire someone to guide this kind of conversation and you want to be a liaison to the mental health community or toward your church club, or you could be a liaison to your church and say, we want to find a way that our church can be a part of Imagine Fox Cities. And these are the 3 things we're going to do in this year, and we'll let you know how it went. So if you're interested in reporting back what you're doing or saying, I want to be, a leader in this, there's ways you can connect with your own groups and your own circles and let us know what you're doing.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. Is there anything that we didn't ask that you would like to share at this point?
I think there's just one more vehicle that we learned about that's a little more granular and public health oriented, but I just want to raise it. We learned that there's a national effort to measure how people are doing through this concept of well-being, and that's what our survey is rooted in. It's a survey that's used nationally, so we can measure our well-being against other communities, and that survey is really rooted in how you feel. So you say, I feel I have high well-being or low well-being. It's a very personal thing. So I just wanted to note that our survey is a national type survey that we can monitor through the years and compare to other parts of the country. A second thing is that there is a new and well-used actually rubric for kind of quantifying what goes into well-being, and those are called the vital conditions. Those are on our website. We don't need to list all of those, but it's a really great way to condense all the things. I think there's 8 or 10 that can go into your personal well-being, from education to health to mental health to economic. And so when you take each of those categories and as a community you kind of look at each of those down the road, you can pretty well predict how your community's well-being is going to be by how you are in each of those specific areas of well-being. The only reason I bring that up is you might be hearing through our healthcare community and other arenas the use of vital conditions. Just wanted to just put that nugget out there so it doesn't sound strange if some of the listeners hear it another time, the vital conditions.
All right, Beth, it is shout out time. Do you have any shout outs you would like to make?
Well, I first want to shout out Walt Rugland and Paula Morgan, who first thought of this idea and gathered people together back in 2017, 2018. And they had this huge vision of having a vision, and they weren't afraid to move it forward. And those are the kind of people that can start a ball like this going. And I am really grateful to them. I'm also grateful to the whole committee, which I can't name. There's so many people who came forward to work on this, all completely volunteer. And then we had some fabulous donors that helped us with some out-of-pocket costs through the convenings and other aspects of the initiative to date. And that's the Community Foundation, the Bulk Company, U.S. Venture, Thrivent, and there's a number of other donors like Bank of Kaukauna. And they really just stepped up to say, we want to see what we can do here. Without specifics, we didn't really know what would happen. So I just want to thank all those people who had belief without questioning, because that's where you really start seeing the visionary action. So
thank you.
Thank you for listening, and I look forward to talking more about this in the future.
So at this time, we're going to start wrapping up this episode. Appleton Engaged listeners, thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for giving us your ears and your minds. Thank you for caring about another amazing resource that we have in our community. If you would like to be a guest, or if you would like to recommend a guest, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at diversity@appleton.org. Once again, that is diversity@appleton.org. And, I have a second request, and that has to do with please help us raise Appleton Engage's profile. While you're listening to this podcast, hit the subscribe button. Also, leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing. These are things that raise our analytics, and the better our analytics, the more Appleton Engaged gets shared with more eyes and more ears. And we think we have something pretty special here. And the more eyes and ears that learn about Appleton Engaged, the more people learn about our amazing resource and create more opportunity for our community to get engaged.
Thank you, Beth. We really love the conversation. Reimagining well-being and belonging in a community is a very powerful idea, if you ask me. So please, please, please do check out the website and see the ways you can be impactful in this beautiful dream. Until next time, stay thoughtful, stay curious, and stay engaged.